Hello, everyone. My name is Tiara Thomas, and I am Secretary and Student Affairs Chair for the African American Alumni Association of Case Western Reserve. It is my pleasure to welcome you this evening. The African American Alumni Association was officially established in October 2009, and our purpose is to provide support and networking opportunities to African American alumni of CWRU. We work to provide a forum for the university to recruit students and foster friendship among persons connected with CWRU. I hope that you and your loved ones are healthy and safe. And before we get started today, I would just like to give a few housekeeping notes. So first, everyone is muted by default. We ask that you stay muted to limit background noise during the program. We know that some of you have submitted questions prior to the event, and we hope to get to them throughout the course of the evening. If you should have any questions, please utilize the chat feature and we will do our best to get them answered for you. So that we know who you are, we welcome you to rename yourself by clicking on Participants, finding your name, then using the More option and selecting Rename. Finally, if you can, we ask that you turn on your video. We like to see your smiling faces. And with that, I am so happy to welcome you to this installment of Profiles of Inclusive Excellence, a virtual series in collaboration with the African American Alumni Association, the Office for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equal Opportunity, and the African and African American Studies Program to highlight the work and research of African American faculty and staff. Tonight's Profiles of Inclusive Excellence is with Robert Solomon, Vice President of the Office of Inclusion, Diversity, and Equal Opportunity. Robert L. Solomon Esquire is a graduate of Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee, and the Ohio State University Moritz College of Law. He began his career as an Assistant Attorney General for the state of Ohio, and also served as a Franklin County Municipal Court Magistrate before joining the Ohio State University Moritz College of Law to work in administration. During his tenure, he served as Assistant to the Dean, Director of the Moot Court and Lawyering Skills Program, Assistant Dean for Financial Aid and Admission, and advisor to the Black Law Student Association and Asian Pacific American Law Student Association, and as an adjunct professor focusing on evidence, trial advocacy, and appellate advocacy. In 1999, he left the university to work as an assistant United States attorney for the Department of Justice. In 2001, he returned to the Moritz College of Law to resume his duties as a senior assistant dean for admission and financial aid, and to head the Office of Diversity and Inclusion within the law school as its founding director and chief diversity officer. In 2015, he became assistant vice provost for the Ohio State University's Office of Diversity and Inclusion. In 2020, he was appointed as vice president for the Office of Inclusion, Diversity, and Equal Opportunity at Case Western Reserve University. He has been active in the community, serving on various boards through the years, including the Equal Justice Foundation, the Columbus Academy, Mansion Day School, and Ohio Valley University. He has been an active volunteer with the Law School Admission Council, including service on the Board of Trustees, the Misconduct and Irregularities in an Admission Subcommittee, Finance and Legal Affairs Committee, Diversity Committee, and the 2011 Annual Meeting Planning Committee. He also served on the Diversity Committee of the American Bar Association. He was active in the Columbus Bar Association as well, having served as chair of the Law School Liaison Committee for the Long Range Planning Committee and the Minority Clerkship Task Force. He has served on the executive board of the John Mercer Langston Bar Association as parliamentarian, chair of the Professional Development Committee, and as president. Solomon is president emeritus of 100 Black Men of Central Ohio and is board chair emeritus of the Afrocentric Personal Development Shop. His past honors include being appointed by former Ohio Governor Ted Strickland to serve on the Ohio Ethics Commission in 2010, selected by Congress to represent the district at the 2006 National African American Leadership Summit, recipient of the National Hispanic Bar Association Region X President Award in 2015, and the George Voinovich Public Service Award from the Ohio State Moritz College of Law in 2016. Our host for this evening will be Dr. Heather Burton. Dr. Burton is Senior Director for Faculty and Institutional Diversity with Case Western Reserve University, and she specializes in gender and racial equity. Dr. Burton also serves as acting co-director of the African and African American Studies program. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Burton.
Thank you, Tiara, and thank you to everyone for being here this evening. It is an honor that tonight's Profiles of Inclusive Excellence is my direct supervisor. So I get to ask the tough questions tonight, but just kind of understanding our profiles of excellence. And I think this is the great thing about the profiles of excellence is that we learn about the individuals. And so we started this year off with our provost, Ben Vinson, and got to see a different side of Provost Vinson, and then moved into some of our faculty as we continue throughout the year. We also last month experienced Dr. Jolly and Dr. Jolly's ability to beatbox. And those are things that we typically would not see when they're conducting research or doing a presentation. And so tonight, as we always do, Vice President Simon, is we start the Profiles of Excellence with the quote as it relates to the movie Brown Sugar. And so we remember in Brown Sugar that Sanaa Lathan and Taye Diggs, there was it was about hip hop. And so there was a question that was always asked at the beginning of every one of her interviews. And that question was, when did you fall in love with hip hop? So instead of saying, when did you fall in love with hip hop? Our question is in reference to your discipline. So it's, when did you fall in love with law, legal aspects, wanting to be a lawyer? When did that come about?
Wow. So I fell in love with the idea of being a lawyer and going to law school when I was in high school. There was I'm a first generation college graduate, and there was someone from my church whose parents were college educated, and he wanted to be a lawyer. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And then later I did a little research, and it was kind of idealistic. I thought that lawyers understand the law and they are able to make a difference in our society. So it was definitely a pie in the sky approach, thinking that I wanted to do something that could make a difference and transform our society. So I made that decision when I was a high school student, and I stayed on that track from that point on.
And so we know that you've had, you've had some vast experience when it comes to being a lawyer and your legal experience. And so what I want to touch on now is the idea of you being the U.S., working in the U.S. as a U.S. attorney. What was that like?
Wow. So, the first time I practiced law, I worked for the Ohio Attorney General's office. So that was kind of my foundation of learning how to practice law. Going to the U.S. Attorney's office and working for the Department of Justice sort of elevated all of that because the cases just seem to have higher stakes, more serious. The impact was greater. So it was really an honor to work for the federal government in that capacity to impact what was going on with people in our society. So I think there was a lot of honor to it. But the other side of it is it was a little scary because after doing it a while, I think I discovered that, boy, the government has a lot of power. So, I mean, if you're doing it for good, it's great. I think we've all discovered that if you're doing it for evil, it could be a hot mess. But I discovered just a depth of the governmental power that exists around us.
And then you went on to teach. And so you've taught at Ohio State. And I know recently you've been asked to teach here at Case Western. And I've been convincing you, as well as some others, to go ahead and take on the load so you can be busy and bogged down in student teaching like the rest of us. Yeah. But in that, what is it about teaching and working with students that you like?
Wow. I really like, I love being around students and engaging with them and watching their growth and development. So that really energizes me. I knew your question about, when did you fall in love with hip hop? And I was thinking about that, but I didn't think you were going to go with law. I thought you were going to go with DEI and teaching and all that sort of thing.
I guess I could have, but I know that, and I would, what the audience probably doesn't know is that just the extensiveness of you being a lawyer, and so they connect everything with your D&I work. So right. I wanted them to hear this other side. Like we know the D&I work, we see the D&I work, but there is so much more to what you have done academically.
Yes. No, you're right. So I'll connect those two things with the question you asked me about teaching. And it is sort of relates to how I accidentally ended up in DEI work. It was through youth ministry and youth work. So I was a Bible school teacher and a youth worker, and I had these high school students, and I started asking them, are you all preparing for the ACT and the SAT and all this sort of thing? And I had these very bright, talented African American students who were telling me that their counselors were not getting them to prepare. No one was really talking to them much about college and everything. And so I took it upon myself to just take my class to my office. We did practice SATs, ACTs, and all this sort of thing. So it was really an outgrowth of working with these young people and seeing their needs and trying to figure out a way to be a supplement and to be a help. And so I think that's closely connected to why I like teaching, because I really like engaging with students and helping them and contributing to their growth and development, because someone did that for me. And I need to add that. I had some people in my life who invested in me when I was young, and it changed, I think, the trajectory of my life, and I wanted to give back in that way.
So I'll go back though, since you were prepared for the D&I question, because you've said in so many things, you've said in so many of these conversations, in that, when did you fall in love with D&I? Was that through this story, or was it through something else? Because I know our similar is a story in terms of the accidental joining D&I work.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yeah. No. Absolutely. Yes. That is it. Really. So I started doing this work before it had a name. Right. I mean, we all know, DEI, D&I. We all know it now. But really, it was about identifying unique needs, particularly with underserved communities, and trying to make sure that equity was achieved and engaging with people in that way. So that's when I think it happened. Long before I had a name for it. I think I was doing the work officially even for a long time before we started calling it that, and that there were even chief diversity officers who had a title or a name.
Yeah, I know we've shared similar stories with this work. I can reflect back and remember when I first started in this work, that it was the Office of Multicultural Minority Affairs. It was Office of Minority Affairs. And then it went to Multicultural Affairs, and then the concept of the melting pot, and then diversity and inclusion. And so then there was a push for the diversity and chief diversity officers and everything. And so I know that you are committed to diversity and inclusion, as well as seeing culture and climate change. In your current role, what are some of the things that excite you about D&I work?
I think you put it in the framework that I like to think about, and that is community, culture, climate, and curriculum, right? And I think what excites me, and we do a lot of training. We do a good bit of training on campus, but we also do it in the community and with different organizations. And I think what really excites me is when you're talking about these issues and you're working with people and you see the light bulb go off and you see someone make that change sort of intellectually and understand that really all we're trying to do is get to equity so that everyone has a positive experience, that good things can happen for everyone in our communities. And it's so easy for us to be rather myopic and only see what's happening in our world. But really, diversity, equity, inclusion tries to move us out of our narrow world and to see the world from different perspectives, and to consider how, other people are affected. And when that happens, that really excites me when I'm able to see that take place.
And so we had, a few questions that were submitted. I think the host has stopped my video. Go ahead. So we had a few questions that were submitted through some of our participants. And so the first question that I'll ask is, what guides your decision-making in inclusion? And then how do you navigate tough decisions? And what are some examples of this? So I guess that's kind of a three-part question that they've posed.
Right. I think what guides me is first asking the question, what is right? What's the right thing to do? And sometimes the right thing to do is not the easy thing to do. It may not be the popular thing to do, but I ask, is it right to do? And I think that connects really seamlessly with navigating those tough decisions. Because sometimes when you make the decision to do the right thing, you have to navigate those who will push back against it, who won't like it, who will oppose it. And I also think that's where my legal training comes in, because lawyers are taught to be problem solvers. And so when I'm confronted with tough, I try to find a way to solve the problem. What is the problem? How do we solve this problem? It may not be perfect. And that's why knowing what's right is important, because even if you make an imperfect decision, if you are moving toward what is right and just, even if it's tough, even if it's unpopular, you can find confidence in knowing that you made a decision because it was the right thing to do.
And I think it takes me to the idea that, and we've discussed this very often in our office as well as presenting, is the good and bad. And so this idea where we mix up right and wrong versus good and bad, and especially when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So how do you navigate those tough decisions when you have to make them? What are some of the skills that you put in place?
Well, I think transparency is really important. So you got to be open about what you're thinking and why you're making the decisions. I did grow up in the era where, when you're dealing with parents, it's that you don't get a why because I said so was the why. Well, that's not how it should work with navigating decisions in a professional space. Because I said so is not an appropriate answer. I think that we need to work through the rationale and explain our reasoning. And there will be people who will disagree with the reasoning. But if they can understand why you made the decision that you made, then hopefully that's helpful, even if they don't agree with the decision that's made.
Yeah, and I think Peter Yang asked for an example of this. I can give many examples of this, but I don't know if you have a concrete example of this type of navigating in the tough decisions.
Well, okay, and I'll give you one. A certain emeritus faculty member within, I don't know, the first few weeks that we were here, I can't remember what it was. Their first communication with me was to criticize what we were doing and say that we weren't serious about diversity and that we only had people speaking from a certain point of view. I think maybe this was shortly after George Floyd's murder, and we were engaged in a lot of discourse and discussions about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so basically he wrote what I thought to be, first of all, you don't know me. Your first interaction with me should be, it needs to be welcome to case, not I don't like what you had to say. So I thought it was rude. I still think it's rude. And so I didn't answer. So that was my decision, that it didn't, I was busy. It didn't merit my attention. Well, apparently that wasn't enough. They had to follow up and then try to call me out about not answering them. And I think they copied somebody else. And so what I did was I did respond, and I said my lack of response was a response. But then I went on. I mean, he said a lot of stuff like, you know, most Black people feel lucky to be in this country. And I mean, it was a bunch of rhetoric. But I did go on to explain a few things to him about what we were engaged in, that we welcome discussion, we welcome diversity of ideas, and that the work of diversity, equity, inclusion is not singularly the work of OIDIO, but as a campus. And there are many venues and opportunities for us to bring scholars and thinkers and influencers to this campus. And when any of us bring them, we try to create spaces where we can have robust discussion and debate, et cetera, and all this sort of thing. And so, you know, I got into that. And my point is that my decision was to share my rationale, but not to engage further. I really wasn't interested in a debate. What I was interested in is being transparent about what we do. Here's what we do, and to invite that person to invite anybody they wanted to campus. And we would welcome to an opportunity to engage with them. But whoever we brought, we would make sure that every person had an opportunity to agree or disagree with them and to share their thoughts. And that is how we would engage in robust exploration of ideas.
Yeah, and I do remember that email, and we joke in the office all the time for our listening audience this evening is that we are always getting hate mail. So we used to hate mail in our office that we often just ignore because it happens so regularly about what we're doing or what we're not. But there's a question that came in that said, doing what is right is certainly an approach, but right is relative. I'm wondering about what values or what criteria goes into the determination that a decision or action is the right thing to do. And so I guess basically asking, what are the values that guide your decision making or what is right? And I'm thinking along the lines probably if you think about what are some of the things that guide your decision making when it comes to values.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, I suppose that you know, that's a question that goes to what are your values, right? You know, so my values are shaped by my life in terms of what's right, like most people, in terms of their influences. So for me, you know, I lean on my foundations, whether it be, you know, my education, you know, as a lawyer, I certainly have a certain perspective about justice and equality and fairness. I certainly have a foundation in faith. I use that to guide me in terms of, you know, what my beliefs are and, you know, what the values that my parents taught me about treating people fairly and equally, the values of service, giving back. You know, I suppose I could list a whole litany of things, and probably some of those values I might not even be aware of because it's a very complex thing. So I would, you know, say to the questioner, what would you say are your values? I mean, it's a hypothetical question. And what are all the things that you draw on in terms of determining what your values are? And I do believe that in some situations, one can argue that right is relative, but yeah, I don't know that I agree with that 100%.
And I think some of the other things that guide is, and we talked about this earlier today in a meeting, is the theories that we also research and are well aware of in this work, is that as the vice president of diversity and inclusion, you don't just come to the space with your opinion, you also come to the space with knowledge and with material that backs up what's being put forth. If you ever had the opportunity to visit VP Solomon's office, you would see quite a few books And I can say on our website, most of the books that are on there are books that he has read. So I would contribute to say that that's also one of your guiding principles, is that you are well read, and you are well read in this work.
We do believe in research and data. Maybe maybe that wasn't clear, that best practices, research, data to support positions that we take and the ideas that we have.
So another question that came in is, what is one of your pet peeves in working with the university actively to hire a diverse staff and faculty reflective of the society, along with a curriculum that is diverse?
Okay. That's a tough one, but I'll nail it down. And I learned this phrase from a human resources person in the corporate sector. And she referred to this strategy as post and pray. That's what we call. So if you think about a job, well, you post a job and pray that something good happens. So in the DEI space, you're praying, we pray, I'm posting it, and we're just going to pray we get a diverse pool. So it's the combination of post and pray, and there just aren't any people out there. So it's a combination of someone who is doing what post and pray is the minimum that you can do to attract a diverse pool of applicants, and then say that there just aren't any qualified, capable, historically underrepresented or women applicants, or whatever the case might be, of what you're looking for. So that's a pet peeve, because you have to put in some work. You have to engage in the process. There are tons of best practices that you can utilize in order to connect with networks, to do outreach, to make phone calls, to really beat the bushes, to find these incredibly talented people who are out there. But there are policies and procedures that yield inequitable results. And so I think that when people don't engage in that I find that frustrating.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And we see that often, don't we?
Yes.
So what is the most important decision you have made in your career, and how did it turn out? And in hindsight, would you do anything differently?
I think for me, the most important decision in my career was to bring my whole self to my profession and what I did professionally. I'd say that's the most important decision. And I'll give you the context. Early on, when I moved from the practice of law to working in higher education, my first higher education position was working in the law school at Ohio State. And I was in an administrative role, and I'd been practicing full time. And so I think, the practice of law can be very singular, confined, and I was sort of working in that way. But as an administrator, I think that in any higher education, you engage more with students, with colleagues, with other people throughout the university. And I think I was still kind of in that singular mode. And so my boss at the time, Gregory Williams, he was dean of the law school. He went on to become president of the City University of New York and the University of Cincinnati. So Greg Williams came to visit the church that I was attending. And at the time, I was working with the church, and I was speaking on this particular Sunday, and he came to hear me. And so afterwards, and he talked to me at the office, and he said, who's that guy? I didn't know what he was talking about. He said, the person that I saw speaking is not the person I see around here every day. And he said, I would really like to see more of him here in this space. And that was sort of a light bulb, an aha moment for me. And I didn't realize that I was compartmentalizing myself, that I was not bringing my whole self to my profession, and that I was really being someone different away from the job than I was in the space, not recognizing that I had a lot more to contribute to my work professionally. That's really part of my life away from work. And so from that point on, I've learned to bring my whole self to work. So that's part of my personality. That's part of how I engage. I'm far more outspoken and direct in professional settings than I was when before I entered higher education. I was just practicing law. So what you see is what you get.
And so speaking of that, and the what you see is what you get, who is Vice President Solomon? Like, who are you? What are some words to describe you?
Oh, wow. I don't know. Well, okay. I'm a person who loves people. I love to engage. I love to get to know people. I love to interact, which is why, this virtual world is killing me. And I can't wait until we can really interact. I like to, to be face to face with someone and engage with them. I love music. I love all kinds of music. I love movies. I love books. I love to laugh and have fun. I am a relational person, and so I like building relationships with people, and I love meeting new people. So that I think that's the kind of person that I am.
And so, what has been your greatest accomplishment thus far? Your greatest professional achievement?
That's funny. The reason we're laughing about that because that one I knew who wrote that question, and I said that. Well, I'm going to say my greatest professional achievement was having the wisdom to promote the incredible DEI professional Janetta Hammock because she wrote the question. It may not be at the top of the list, but it's one of the great ones. Unfortunately, you all know that Janetta left us for a great opportunity. We still miss her. On a broader scale, I would say that my greatest accomplishment was to create an office for diversity and inclusion in the Moritz College of Law. So in the recitation of the things that was read by Tiara was when I came back from the Justice Department to work at the Moritz College of Law at Ohio State and become the founding director of that Office of Diversity and Inclusion. That was my idea. That was the idea that I pitched to the dean of the law school and convinced her that it was needed and that it needed a budget and that it needed to be funded. And so I, in essence, pioneered that work on Ohio State's campus in the colleges. It was going on broadly on campus, but to actually have an office with a budget dedicated to those issues within the law school was new. And it happened because it was basically my brainchild. Now, I don't take any great pride in that. I just saw a need, and I was, bold enough to try to sell that need to the dean of the law school. The reason why I think it's one of the greatest accomplishments is because that office still exists today, and that was 20 years ago, before people were receiving the title Chief Diversity Officer. That still had not been part of the vernacular of people doing this work. So it happened organically, and it's still a part of what goes on at the university, and it played a role in developing the work that happened at Ohio State in that 20-year span.
This may be a tough one, but what is your ideal campus climate culture when we talk about diversity and inclusion and equity? What would the space look like?
Oh, wow.
Feel like? And
so, you all can start playing the violins, I suppose. I would want a campus that looks like America, where, you can walk across campus and you'll see everyone there, right? And when you see everyone, The people that you see, whether they be faculty, staff, or students, you might see different races and ethnicities represented, but not just in their groups, but engaged with one another. That you will see, diverse pools of students and faculty engaging with one another, such that it would feel as though there's no particular dominant group, but that everyone's interacting with one another. And you're walking across campus and you see people saying hello and greeting one another and laughing and talking and engaging. You would see a variety of courses being offered, and you would see classes in critical race theory or African and African American studies, or Latin studies, or LGBTQ studies, different things like that. And those classes would not only have individuals who identify with that identity, but the classes would also be filled with people who do not share that identity, because they are sufficiently interested in learning more and expanding their knowledge and their world. It would be a campus that's interested in what's going on in the community around it, and being partners with all of those areas, being a good corporate citizen, contributing to what's going on in the society. And that's a tough one. And that's really culture change, and that will take time. I believe it can happen, but we have to handle it with care, and we have to move forward in an intentional way.
Wilma Pebbles Wilkins says, "Thank you for your hard work. This is a good perspective." Wilma, I'm going to tell you, he doesn't do any work, actually. Just kidding. But so most people don't know that you are a native of this area. You are actually from Akron, Ohio. And so what was it that made you want to come back to Cleveland, or come to Cleveland? Was it just the job, or were there some other things that said, you know what, I want to be close to home again?
Yes. Well, I must say that I absolutely love Columbus. So there was nothing about Columbus that made me want to leave Columbus. So, some people, when they go somewhere else, they're running from something. So I wasn't running from anything. I absolutely loved living in Columbus. But my roots are in Northeast Ohio. I've had nothing but, positive experiences growing up in Northeast Ohio, nothing but positive experiences being in Cleveland. I spent a good amount of time in Cleveland when I was growing up. Although, as a teenager, I don't think I really knew what it was like to live in Cleveland. And, so much has happened, and Cleveland's really grown and flourished since that time. But also the university. I mean, I grew up knowing about Case Western Reserve University. I knew about its sterling reputation, its academic strength, and the great things that exist. All the pluses and the positives about Case I knew about. And so the reputation went a long way in terms of making it a place that I would want to be. Of course, I had worked with President Snyder when she was at Ohio State. She was a provost and a law school faculty colleague. So I also had some background in the person that was leading the university at the time. So there was that. And in the vernacular of what we say, Northeast Ohio is full of my people. I have family everywhere. Between Cleveland, Akron, Canton, Barberton, and all the small little hamlets and enclaves all around here. So you can find, Watkinses and Sperlings, and there's a whole bunch of them, people who are part of my family who live in Northeast Ohio.
What are some of the things that you enjoy doing in Cleveland?
Well, that's hard to say because Cleveland is just not opening up. Some people don't know that my son was a professional baseball player, so I love baseball. So, going to baseball games is something that I love and enjoy. And I'm hoping to do more of that as the city opens up. My wife and I are foodies, so we love good restaurants and good food. So we're gradually trying different restaurants. We live in Shaker, so we tried out everything in the square, and so we've been branching out and trying out other restaurants. So if you all have recommendations, please let me know, because now that things are opening up, we're getting an opportunity to explore Cleveland and see what's around here.
And what are some of the things that you like to do? And I say that because I know you like to cook.
Yes, I do. I love to cook. Yeah, I do.
Because I like to eat.
I do. I love to cook. So that, read, go to movies, go to concerts. I love museums. Getting out in nature, hiking, biking, that kind of thing is a lot of fun too.
What are some of your favorite books?
Oh wow, So I love books that certainly cover DEI topics, right? Beverly Tatum's, why are all the Black kids sitting together in the cafeteria? Books like, everybody knows Cornel West's Race Matters, or work by Shades of Freedom by A. Leon Higginbotham Jr. But I also love fiction. And because I'm so busy, a lot of times the way I get my fiction is by listening to books. Let's see, I'm trying to think of something that I really enjoy in terms of fiction. One book that I really liked recently, Great Small Things, is a good book by, I think, Jodi Picoult. I like John Grisham books. Let's see, what was this most recent? A Time for Mercy or something like that, a more recent book that he wrote. So, of course, he's a lawyer who writes, so all of his stuff is usually appealing to me. John Sanford, mystery, action, certainly just kind of a whole host of Black authors. I mean, I could go back, a long ways and talk about some books that some of you have not even heard about. How Stella Got a Groove Back was a book before it was a movie. I love those. B.B. Moore Campbell. And now I'm getting into different R.M. Johnson, different authors and books that I read. So I enjoy all those things too.
Yes. If you had to recommend one D&I book, what book would you recommend?
There's so many. Just one?
Okay, I'll give you two.
You give me two. Let's see. I really loved So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijoma Olu. I just loved her perspective. And actually, when you hear her talk, that also kind of gets you going. And what's another good one? I do love Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, because I think it really capsulizes a perspective that a lot of people don't really understand, and so that people can grasp. But there are all sorts of things. I want to add one. Well, this one isn't really DEI, but it's entitled Life on the Color Line, written by Gregory Williams, and he actually was the dean of the law school when I went to work at Ohio State initially. Life on the Color Line. So it's really autobiographical about his life. It is an incredible story. It reads like fiction, but it's a true story. And I'll give you a little bit of a snippet. Greg Williams's father was half Black, married a white woman, and his father passed for white. When the marriage broke up, Greg and his father and his brother had to move back home where everyone knew Greg's father was Black. So he, as a little boy, had lived the first 7 or 8 years of his life as a little white boy. And then when he moved back home, he lived the rest of it as being Black, because everyone, even though physically he did not look Black, but everyone identified him as Black because all the family there was Black. And he really talks about that journey of being treated differently and viewed differently and engaging in the Black community. So it's a compelling story, and I recommend it.
Yes, President Snyder actually had mentioned that book to me as well in a conversation, and or I should say former President Snyder. And then I was thinking about White Fragility, that has become my new recommendation. And I was not a fan of Robin DiAngelo the first time I picked up White Fragility, but after reading it completely and starting my position in D&I work, it really brought a lot of things to light for me on how to handle white people within the space of D&I work. And so I recommend that book as well. So Wilma from our chat recommended Nighttown for you to eat. So if you're looking for a place, she recommended Nighttown.
Nighttown.
And I've been there. They used to have jazz out. Well, it's COVID now. I don't know. I mean, we're slowly moving back, but I don't know what their setup is now for Nighttown, but it's a nice location. What has been some of your biggest challenges being the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion?
I would say my biggest challenge, one is really learning the nuances, right? Any new job, any new experiences, everybody knows the written rules, right? But it's the unwritten rules that you have to navigate. And often you don't know what they are until you come up against them and you start asking why. Well, why do we do this? And so who makes this decision and how does this work? I think that's the biggest challenge. And I don't think it's necessarily unique to CASE. I think that whatever work you do, there will be written rules and there will be unwritten rules. And so figuring out what the unwritten rules are, and if those unwritten rules are not helpful or beneficial, figuring out how to navigate them, how to change them, how to influence other people to consider another way and approach. And some may be written too. Some are written. You just didn't know about it. Oh, we don't do that, or well, we can't do that, and particularly when they don't really make the best sense to you, that can be a challenge. But figuring out how to solve that problem, that's one of my tasks.
Have you thought about ever having another career?
Oh, yes. Well, jokingly. So when I was in college, I was in probably every play and musical. I was in performing groups and all that sort of thing. So I was kind of like pie in the sky. Oh, maybe I'll, do something in the arts. So I'm a very arts-centered person. So love music, love plays, musicals, theater, museums, all those sorts of things. So, that had occurred to me. I mean, I suppose I've had two things. I've been a full-time practicing lawyer. I keep my license current. You never know who might decide they don't want to be bothered with you anymore. So I can always work for myself. But in addition to that, I think that I would enjoy working in an entertainment space.
Yes, and I know we had a request for you to close out with benediction and the doxology, but I won't put you on the spot to do that. But for those of you who don't know, that VP Solomon does sing. So when he talks about his career or the other with the arts and music interests, to kind of wrap us up, one or two more questions. But what are the things that are important to you outside of the institution? Well,
there are probably some categories. I think probably the most obvious thing outside the institution is my family, my wife, my children, my extended family. Those things are eminently important to me. Our children are semi-launched. Our son is now a law student and our daughter is a graduate student. And she wants to be a writer. So she finished her first year in an MFA program for fiction. And our son wants to be a lawyer. He was a professional baseball player. He will probably continue to work in the sports and entertainment space. So getting them totally launched. And then my wife and I work with, the marriage and family work and ministry in our church. So, my faith and my work with our church is very important to me. We are a community-oriented church and congregation. I'll have to find one here in Cleveland, but because of the virtual nature of what's been going on, we've actually maintained our role in Columbus, but we see that coming to an end. And so we will find somewhere to work in Northeast Ohio in the same way. And that connects because I want to be involved in the community. I want to see what the needs are in the community and to give back. And that was a foundation that was laid for me as a child. My house was a house where people came for food. My mother would have me taking meals to people just as a young kid. It was sometimes a refuge for a woman who had been abused, where we just made space and figured it out. And so the message was clear at a very young age, that you help people around you and that you give back. And so that just stuck with me. And so we try to do the same. So those are the things: family, church, community. Those things are important to me.
I'm laughing at semi-launched.
Yeah. When they start paying all their own bills, that will be fully launched.
And so to wrap us up for this evening, what do you hope your legacy at Case Western Reserve University will be?
Wow, that's a good question. I hope, there is, I will put it in the framework that I look at: community, curriculum, culture, and climate. I would hope that my legacy would be that the community or the demographics of Case will have improved with respect to the representation of underrepresented populations on campus. When I'm gone, hopefully there will be more people represented here. I've been able to build on a legacy that was laid by Dr. Marilyn Mobley and others, and I hope that I can build on their legacy and make sure that those numbers grow in terms of community. The culture, when I leave, I hope that the legacy is that it is a culture that is more warm, accepting, and engaging, so that everyone has that feeling of being welcomed and valued. That the curriculum will grow and expand, that our faculty will gain tools of how to teach in an inclusive manner, and that with the courses that will be offered will have a perspective representing ideologies and the contributions of people from across the world, and not just a singular perspective. And certainly the climate, that it will be a climate where when people are on this campus, they will feel that they matter, that they are important, that staff will feel like what I do is important, and my colleagues across this campus value what I do, and I make this place run well, and that it is appreciated in that regard. So community, culture, curriculum, and climate. I would like to see the needle moved further in all of those areas. If I move the needle at all, then I feel like it's a legacy that's been worthwhile.
Yes, that's a great legacy. I would ask you, what would you want your legacy to be outside of the university? Legacy you want to leave, but I won't put you on the spot with that legacy.
Okay.
Unless you have something very quickly with outside of the university.
Outside of the university? Probably in the same way in the community. I would like to have a legacy of people would be able to say that I made a positive difference in the lives that I touched. I can't change the entire world, but I can certainly have an impact on the world that's around me. the people that I come in contact with. And that's what I'd like to do, to have that positive impact there.
Well, thank you, VP Solomon. Thank you for, I thank you for this interview, but for those who are on the call, you also need to know that VP Solomon is the one who came up with the title of the Profiles of Inclusive Excellence. And before we implemented this and talked about this as my role with the African American Studies minor and then working with the African American Alumni Association, I had to get the sign off from VP Solomon. And so thank you for the opportunity to allow us to do this and support the work. And I tell anyone that the one thing that everyone on this campus needs to know about VP Solomon is that he believes in culture and climate change, as well as I say, I get my work done and I get my job done because I have the support of a great supervisor. And because that supervisor stands behind the mission and the work of creating culture, climate change, and creating difference or changes within our campus, then everyone within our office can get the work done. So from the Office of Inclusion and Diversity and Equal Opportunity, we thank you. We thank everyone for joining us this evening. A special thank you to my co-director, Cassie, of the African American Studies minor, Dr. Cassie Pittman-Clater, and to the director who's on sabbatical right now, Joy Bostic, who has also worked closely with us in doing this Profiles of Excellence. We thank each of you. And I will turn it back over to Tiara Thomas, who will close us out for the evening.
All right. Thank you. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. VP Solomon and Dr. Burton, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with us today. And thank you to the Office of Inclusion, Diversity, and Equal Opportunity. So just before we head out, just want to let you know some things that are on the horizon. So feel free to join the African American Alumni Association on Thursday, June 10th, for a special wine tasting event with local winery Chateau Huff Vineyards. So this Black-owned vineyard and winery at Chateau Huff, they're located in the heart of the historic Huff neighborhood, and right near downtown Cleveland and CWRU, right in University Circle. Our guest speaker for that event is CEO Mansfield Frazier, and he will discuss the founding and the vision for the winery. So you can find out more about the African American Alumni Association at case.edu/alumni. And you can follow us on Facebook at Case Western Reserve University African American Alumni Association, or you can search at CWRU AAA Alumni. So with that, thank you again, everyone, for joining, and have a great evening.